Hey, Juan here. So before we're starting to develop any idea, we should always try to validate if our idea actually suits our user needs. This is why it's important that we are able to pilot an idea or prototype an idea with our key customers and get feedback from them if this actually suits their needs. So today we are going to talk about how we should prototype or pilot ideas before we get them to implementation. So once we have identified if an idea aligns with our vision and if an idea is actually a good business case for our company, it's important that we validate this idea with some key customers. This is why we are going to do piloting or prototyping of the idea, where we try to expose it to a certain degree to these users and try to get feedback on it and understand if this suits their needs or not. Is this the solution that answers the problem that the customers are having? So prototyping ideas is going to be quite different depending on the products that you are providing to your users. But in the end, what you want to give them is a hint of what this idea is going to be and how this is going to help them in their own workflows. Prototypes are usually just very early conceptions of what the idea is going to be, and this doesn't mean that the prototype has to be a final product, and the actual final product might be very different from the prototype that we are showing to these early customers. So depending on the industry that you are, your prototypes are going to be quite different. So think of, for example, that you are in car or aircraft industry. There your prototypes are going to look more, what you're going to try to do with your prototypes is show the vision of what your car or your aircraft is going to be and some of the technology that it's going to use. But it's probably by no means going to be a working prototype. It might be that it has an engine, that it moves it around, but it's definitely not going to be the engine that it's going to have. And definitely the looks of the actual final product might change quite a bit from the initial prototype. If you think about software products, here your prototype can be quite many things. Sometimes your prototype is going to be more like a user interface mockup that lets the user see how they are going to interact with your new idea, especially if it's part of an existing product. It is easier then for them to understand what could be the potential value of this new feature or idea that you will be bringing into the product. These dialogues also sometimes can be working dialogues, which means that it will let them interact to a certain degree with the dialogue, that it will help the user understand what it's actually going to do this feature, and to a certain degree how is it going to work. So it's not just only the vision of how it will benefit them, but also how is it going to work. And of course it's not just the dialogues, but dialogues usually have some outputs on the actual product. So showing those outputs, the reports or potential, again, prototypes of those potential reports or how it interacts with other softwares, that's also important to show during the prototype. Sometimes your prototype doesn't even have to be an actual product or an actual mock-up. It can be only like it can be a poll, or it can be a website that introduces the idea to your users and asks for their interest. So basically it could be sign up to a new subscription model, or it could be a poll that tells them the different options that we are balancing when we're thinking about how to implement the idea. So it can be also a poll where you could ask your users or your potential users what about the different values that this idea would have. If we think about the car example, where we could talk there is about, do you need a 7-seater option? So just have it as part of the poll. Is it a 5-seater option or is it a 7-seater option? Just try to find out what is that your users need and how high priority these different items or features within the idea could be. So once you have built your prototype, once you have shown it to your users, then you have to gather the feedback, understand how do the users feel about this new idea. So here there's basically 3 options. First, that the users actually like your idea. In this case, well, you're good to go. Now you have to go into the planning phase and then into the execution phase. One of the things that is very key here is that you have to remember that prototypes are just that. They're just prototypes. And they're typically not good to be used in production. Obviously, if you just build a website or just a poll, obviously you probably cannot use that in a production product, but if you build something like a mock-up dialogue in a software, or if you build like a prototype of a car, you should never try to use these prototypes as part of the solution. Prototype should be only the idea, and it should help you planning and executing the final idea. But taking the prototypes and just continue building the prototype as if it was the idea, it can be a problem in many cases, and this is very common issue in software companies where a prototype is taken forward as part of a production. And usually in prototypes what you do is just that you take a lot of shortcuts just to get something ready to display to the users, and it's by no means meant to be a working prototype. So beware of this, that don't try to take shortcuts with using prototypes as part of the final product. The second possibility is that users actually don't like your solution, but they actually agree with the problem that you had identified. So they understand that, or they see that they had the problem that you are trying to solve, but they don't agree with your solution. And this is the time where you had to actually pivot. And this is why it's very important to be able to define what is the problem and what's the solution. So then you are breaking this in two parts, so it's easier to validate these concepts with the customers. So problem is okay, solution is not. Now it's time to pivot. This is a very common term from startups. The idea here is that you had to try to adapt your solution to meet the customer needs. And this is why it's very important to be agile, and why it's important to have this prototyping, because it can help you a lot even before you go into delivery, to have this early engagement with the users or the potential users, where you get the very early feedback that you understand that the solution is actually going to meet user needs. The last option is that the users actually don't even agree with the problem that you are defining. So they don't see that there's a problem. And then obviously that's a problem for you as a company if you have identify a potential problem and then users don't have that problem. At this point, it's good to have a discussion with these users that are saying that this is not a problem. Is this because we have not chosen the correct users? It might be that then it's just a matter of finding the potential good niche for this problem. Or it might be that people actually don't have this problem, that we think that this is a bigger problem than it actually is for some customers. The options are trying to find the niche of users that will have this problem. And the next one would be trying to discuss or talk with these customers and understand that, do they have a problem, or did we misunderstand the problem that they could have, and try to see if we could redefine it according to the customer needs. And then the last one is that if there is not identified problem that the users see, especially if we talk with several of them, then probably the best is just to dismiss this idea. Remember that sometimes the issue might be only that your problem might be a little too early in time, or it might be a little too late. So prototyping is also key to understand if the timing is the correct one to launch this idea. So it might be that you don't need to necessarily dismiss the idea, but it might go into a backlog if we see that, okay, we thought that the market was mature enough to have this kind of problem, but it's just way too early. So timing is very key to identify also when you're prototyping. So when we define this idea funnel, we define several stages. The first one was the value your ideas, a stage where you try to have a rough estimate of an idea is good for your business and it aligns with your vision. The second stage would be build a business case, where you try to see that, is an idea actually feasible for me, and does it make a good value proposition for the user, and finally, does this have a good potential impact in the business? The third one, it was piloting or prototyping, where we try to actually validate the idea with some potential users. And in the next one, what we're going to look is into how to actually get the idea from the very early stage of the funnel all the way to the execution part. So basically, how do we build a roadmap and how can we execute on it then? So do you build prototypes yourself? Do you try to validate your ideas with some kind of pilot with your users, trying to identify if this idea actually fits the user needs? And how do you actually handle that feedback from the users? Please comment below and let us know. And as always, if you like this video and would like to see more, please subscribe and like the channel. And we will see you in the next one.